Today, Bitcoin jumps to $105,000 as Wall Street rallies and reports circulate that Trump is planning a crypto executive order. And Cosmo Jiang of Pantera reacts to Bitcoin's rise ahead of Trump's inauguration. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Tanae McKeel. Crypto markets mostly in the green today to end the week. As of noon Eastern, Bitcoin jumped 5.8% to $105,000. Ether climbed 3% to $34.38, and XRP pulled back by more than 4% after rallying double digits yesterday. Taking a look at weekly performance, Bitcoin jumped more than 10% after a lull earlier in the week. Ether rose more than 5%, and XRP surged by nearly 38%, all as of noon. Let's talk about the top stories. President-elect Trump reportedly plans to make crypto a national priority. According to Bloomberg, he could release an executive order elevating crypto as a policy priority. Of course, he campaigned on crypto as an issue, which was largely well received by an industry that had been a target of SEC lawsuits and banking discrimination under the outgoing administration. Trump's transition team has also announced a handful of crypto-friendly picks for positions like Treasury Secretary, SEC Chair, and a new crypto and AI czar. Next, Democrat Senator Mark Warner of Virginia turned down an opportunity to be the top Democrat on a new crypto subcommittee under the Senate Banking Committee. Axios reported that Warner rejected the offer and will instead serve as the top Democrat on the Securities, Insurance, and Investment Subcommittee. Senator Warner's office confirmed the news in an email to CNBC. The new Digital Assets Subcommittee was announced at the start of the new Congress earlier this month, with Wyoming Senator and crypto ally Cynthia Lummis serving as chair. All right, let's go back to markets for our main story. I spoke with Cosmo Jiang, general partner at Pantera, to get his reaction to the rally ahead of Trump's inauguration. Cosmo, thank you so much for joining me on Crypto World today. A really interesting week in the markets with the macro narrative kind of leading at the beginning, and now a lot of excitement ahead of Trump's inauguration on Monday. What do you make of the moves, and specifically, I think the contrast between what we saw in Bitcoin, which until today, or not until today, but yesterday was kind of flat. We saw Ether down yesterday. Meanwhile, yesterday, all altcoins were rallying, and then we saw meme coins kind of join the party a little bit more today. And then, of course, some headlines out there on Trump's plans for, the earlier part of his next presidency. What do you make of the action?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an interesting time in the crypto markets, and there's a lot of volatility, and there's a lot of stuff to watch out for. I'd say at a very high level, look, this in the near term, there's obviously a few headwinds, whether it's people thinking about the general macro headwinds of rates being higher for longer. There's some weird technical resistance around the round number of 100K for Bitcoin. And everyone is certainly watching Bitcoin first. I would say, though, that if you think about like the impact of the really the political and regulatory shift that's going to happen, really I anticipate a strong year for all digital assets of Bitcoin and everything else, but really the regulatory shift is more meaningfully positive for tokens outside of just Bitcoin. Because when you think about it, Bitcoin has very clearly benefited from having a more clear recognition for why it exists. That narrative, that story is very known to a lot of people. And frankly, the change in administration doesn't change that. Everyone still knows that there is more adoption, but the story hasn't changed. It's actually for everything else, altcoins, the tokens that represent the other serious, productive projects that actually much more changes with the potential passage of comprehensive regulation. And so that's where we're spending a lot of time and really leaning into. And I think you'll start to see that as the year progresses.
What does success look like for all of those other projects this year? Because it does seem like, the altcoins and just the smaller cap cryptocurrencies are, not as integrated with the broader markets the way Bitcoin became last year. So I think under the Trump administration and having a pro-crypto Congress, a lot of room for innovation in crypto products and offerings. But what does that success look like beyond just, prices of altcoins rallying? Yeah. Are you looking to see this integrated within corporations? What would kind of give it that stamp of legitimacy beyond what you've seen with Bitcoin and Ether?
Absolutely. No, it all comes back to the industry has to deliver, and these tokens have to deliver a service that people want to use and that people are willing to pay for ultimately. For me, the reason why I think digital assets is such an interesting industry is because right now there's only, call it, tens of millions of users that actually interact with blockchain every day. But the reality is, we do believe that a lot of these products, a lot of these protocols that these tokens represent, they will eventually reach penetrations of billions of users over time. And so, if you believe that, then naturally, logically, that must mean that they've delivered some sort of value and that these tokens should probably perform a lot better than something like a Bitcoin. And so, what does that success look like? Look, I think these tokens. I think one of the major maybe misconceptions or the things that people don't get really understand about crypto is that tokens are just a new form of capital formation. What that means is that a lot of these tokens actually represent units of businesses, right? They act and feel a lot like equities. A lot of these businesses will never have an equity. They'll only have a token. That's how they align incentives with management teams, with employees, with token holders or the equivalent of shareholders, and very uniquely to crypto users. And so, I foresee a world where there are more and more of these tokens, and they're recognized as being these value-creating services and they will perform as such as well.
So Cosmo, I think this rally that we're seeing today is especially interesting to me because I have been watching the Bitcoin price action as more of a macro trade. It was in sort of consolidation mode ever since Jerome Powell's comments at the end of December. And then those were kind of pushed away after these cool inflation reports that we got this week. Its correlation with the S&P 500 has really kind of spiked in the last 2 weeks. And it makes a lot of sense to me to see the altcoins rallying ahead of the inauguration. What do you track this year? Something that I've been talking about with a lot of people in crypto and on Wall Street is the idea that even if we get crypto policy out of Congress this year, it could be 9 to 12 months before we actually feel the effects of that. Like we might see the innovation, but we might not see the impact show up in the market. So how would you advise in terms of pacing and just the broader outlook for 2025?
Yeah. I mean, look, in the near term, it's sort of like there's always a few things that spook investors, and that's always true, right? Like the first is this next week's inauguration. Crypto has this very frequent tendency to sell the news. There's been a large correlation of all risk assets, not just Bitcoin, right? Equities too, to the macro data and the rates being a higher for longer scenario. But all that is to say, in the short term, the market is always finding reasons to be worried. That's the wall of worry that needs to be climbed and creates the conditions for stronger future performance. And from a longer term perspective, I think there are truly so many durable headwinds that get us to a strong positive outlook for the year. But to sort of pace that out, certainly the biggest catalyst this year, like you said, is the political and regulatory inflection, right? This is a real paradigm shift for the blockchain industry. And when you think about what can happen, part of the reason why the blockchain industry has struggled over the last couple of years is just a regime that hasn't been as constructive in helping us grow. And the end result is that a lot of entrepreneurs have actually left the U.S. because they felt they weren't welcome here. There's been a lot of capital that's left the space because they felt it was unclear. All that is changing now. The number one reasons why investors said no before was the lack of regulatory clarity, and that's no longer something that they will say. In the near term, what can be done is definitely different than what can be done over the longer term. But in the near term, what can be done? There's already a lot of rumors out about the certain executive orders that Trump has prepared for next week. He has a slate of hundreds of executive orders prepared for next week, allegedly. But amongst them, there are a few for crypto, including, importantly, establishing a regime where telling people that there's a regime where we should be a pro-crypto industry, pro-crypto country. And that's a big shift from prior being potentially an anti-crypto, administration. And the second is potential announcements around the Bitcoin strategic reserve and whether there's going to be anything around that. And as well as dropping of certain regulations that are certain rulemaking from regulators that perhaps limited our growth. Longer term, certainly the hope is that there's comprehensive legislation, whether that's around stablecoins, whether it's some digital asset market structure. I agree. It sort of takes minimum probably 6 to 12 months to even get the ball really rolling and write the legislation. But I think the reality is because the industry wants to play a very strong role in helping shape that legislation, and regulators and I think policymakers are pretty open to that now. We'll start to get a pretty good sense of the range of outcomes of what the regulation might look like much earlier than that legislation coming into fruition. And so people can start building and working towards that much earlier. And so, yes, legislation takes a while to get done, but you can actually start seeing the benefit of it earlier because people start building towards it.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World this week. We'll be back again on Tuesday, and we'll see you then.